Welcome back to another episode of the Heat Your Home Energy Show, and we're joined again by the Sales Director for Octopus Energy Services, Jim Bennett. And we wanted to talk a little bit today, Jim. I mean, we're still in a cost of living crisis in the UK, and I think it's affected everybody. I don't think it matters how deep your pockets are. I think everybody has been hit by this, and just wanted to ask you what's it been like from your perspective? What have you seen both from your perspective, from the people you're dealing with, and from the wider kind of Octopus Energy?
I think there's a number of different facets to it. First and foremost, I've said we try to see the world through the customer's eyes, and we really empathise. And we've had to have a lot of really tough conversations with people in really difficult circumstances where it's, do I feed myself or do I pay the bills? And, we've put a lot of extra money into the fund that we've got to help vulnerable customers, to try and help as many of those people as we can. But whichever way you look at it, it's probably the second biggest bill that's in their house after them, maybe their mortgage. The next one is heating and electricity and gas. And, with Russia's invasion of the Ukraine, we suddenly realised the West's dependency on gas, natural gas. And that's what caused the cost of living crisis. The cost of gas flew through the roof, and that's what caused it. So one of the big things is, in the macro picture, if you can move across to electrification and away from gas, we shouldn't be buffeted by those winds quite so much, and we should be a bit more protected. So I think at a big level, I think the overall drive to the big green piece, the green energy piece, will buffet us from some of that. But right here and now, there's a lot of people in some tough situations. There's a few things about that. Greg came up with a great idea that, it's cheaper to heat the human. Now, what he doesn't want to say is that you don't want people scared to turn on their heating, but at the same time, we'd sent out tens of thousands of electric blankets, which, 40 watts to heat the human, to heat a person, as a result of which, that's one way of keeping warm. And that's one example of the sort of stuff that we've done. But ultimately, it's really, really tough for a lot of people out there. And I think the big dependency on gas is the piece that we've got to try and get away from. The bit that I think is really perverse is, if you look at levies that are on gas and electric, 23 times more levies on electricity than there is on gas. And electricity, can be renewable. It's almost like putting a sugar tax on water. It's really perverse what they're doing. They're making gas artificially cheap and electricity artificially expensive. And what we need to do is shift the two across and get more people onto sort of home electrification, which will get the bills down. So I think that's the big picture. But what's it mean to somebody who's, trying to make the decision between what do they do between, feeding their family or doing something with regards to paying their bills? And I think there's a number of different things. I think, one, we need to do more as a country, and we can't do it on our own as Octopus, to try and make sure that the subsidies are means tested. So if you look at the Great British Insulation Scheme, for example, there's no better spend that you can put in. It was to save the heat that's in your house currently. That's the best spend. It's not put a heat pump in. It's keep the heat that you've currently got by making sure you're well insulated. Then you'll be ready for a heat pump. And the Great British Insulation Scheme is, to all intents and purposes, means tested, because I think you've got to be council tax band A to D in England, which means it's smaller homes. And as a result of which, if you are in those council tax bands and your EPC is D or worse, so it's the ones that are the least efficient, you should be able to get some free insulation. And I think there needs to be more to help there's a lot of stuff that's happening the councils are doing that's good around social housing estates. They're doing district heating, which is basically heat pumps on steroids, but district heating, I think that's useful. But I feel there needs to be more perhaps from the government to give those who can less afford it do the green transition. And I think the National Infrastructure Committee reported last week, one of their recommendations was the government has got to seed the cost of those who can't afford the shift. They've got to seed some money into that pot to be able to move it across. I think it said 4 billion over 12 years. And they want to be able to move that community across. And in the meantime, Octopus will keep, with the care and the compassion and what we try and do for our end customers, we'll take every circumstance on its merits and we'll do whatever we can to try and help them. But I think there's a big geopolitical piece, and then there's what Octopus can do themselves. One thing that's for certain is the general movement of the price of heat pumps coming down has got to see more entrants into the market who perhaps previously wouldn't have afforded it.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely something that we can do.
It definitely increases the number of people who can now afford to make that decision to go. If they're at a position where their boiler needs replacing and they're being faced with £2,500, £3,500, £4,000 to have a boiler installed,
Yeah.
The decision to switch becomes a lot stronger.
Yeah.
There's also the fact that organisations like Octopus being in this industry and offering that solution, along with E.ON are doing it, British Gas are doing it, obviously a network of independent installers across the country doing it as well. But the fact that those big names are coming into it, it gives it some weight, because this isn't just an innovative concept that the local installer who has gone off and identified and is now trying to sell. These are big brands that are standing behind this and will continue to stand behind it and will continue to push it. So that makes the decision to have one. But right now, the impact that can have on your spend is correct me if I'm wrong, but it's limited. It's not going to all of a sudden.
It is limited. To give you some figures in terms of sort of run costs that we've recently done. If you're on a standard tariff and you run a gas boiler and you run a heat pump, it's about £40 to £50 more expensive over a year to run your heat pump on a standard tariff. But if you go on one of our cozy tariffs and you can load shift, so you can heat your water in the morning between 3 and 7 and then heat your home in the afternoon and then maybe do the thermal coasting piece, we've found of all our initial customers on cozy, they've saved in the first 6 months 188 quid. If you can start to save £150 a year versus gas, and then they change the levy, yeah, and then perhaps you then start to move more towards the energy as a service by maybe getting some solar in, or maybe going to the sort of offering that Heatio is thinking about doing, you're starting to move on a path where all these little bits add up. And then add in the smart tech, yeah, which optimizes that piece, optimizes your usage. And I think it's the road that we need to be traveling on, but everybody needs to be traveling on it.
So that gets us to a point where there's a subtle saving in there with the right tariff and some slight changes, none of which, from what you've described there, when talking about people heating their hot water at certain times of day. I mean, I grew up in a home that had an economy 7 meter, economy 10 meter. That's what we did. We charged the hot water at night, and we had plenty of it for the day. So it's we're talking about people making relatively simple changes to their kind of heating schedules and benefiting from it. But we're still not talking about game-changing figures at this point. So if we take but there is a saving. So there's a specific the cost of the equipment now is comparable, and there is, with the right tariff, a little bit of a saving. So making that decision to go for a heat pump is a lot easier. But then you've got all these myths, and we were talking actually in a previous show with actually a national installer, and we talked about where these myths are coming from in the industry. So I'm going to chuck a couple at you first and see whether you.
Just before you do, I'm not stalling for time. You mentioned you had a combi boiler, economy 7.
Yeah.
In the first house I lived in, we didn't have any central heating at all. And the only reason I remember it is my mum used to warm the shirt up in front of the fire, and you belted down the stairs and put a nice warm shirt on. But I tell you what still makes me laugh to this day, next door did have central heating, and it was next to my bed. So I used to snuggle up. I used to snuggle up to the wall at night, and I was lovely and toasty and warm. But these days, most homes do have central heating, but we're leaving it later and later in the year to try and turn them on, because with better insulation you can do that. But there are these myths.
Yeah.
So go on then. And again, we get them all the time coming into people who've been told information, and we have to try and advise them to say, well, look, go and research it. But
we can. I mean, I've been in heat pumps for 20 years, from everything from starting out as a installer, designer, specifier, commission engineer. So I think between us, we should have experienced a fair few of these objections.
Let's give it a go. Go on then.
I mean, the first thing that you hear, and I genuinely think there's 2 schools or 3 or 4 schools of thought on this. So we talked before about how Octopus are developing this, this heat pump that's going to have all the components built into it, and it's going to make the installation time easier. But I would imagine there's a vast majority of consumers who have gone down the route of having an assessment done on their home and probably been told that you're going to have all your radiators upgraded in your home. You're going to have all your pipework ripped out, and you're going to have to find somewhere in the center of this home to mount a huge, whopping, great big cylinder.
Yeah.
So if we start with the radiator upgrade, the upgrades to your emitter system. So there is a school of thought that says, a myth that says all your radiators are going to need replacing and all your pipework's going to need to be upgraded.
Yeah. And, it does come down to what is the heat loss of your house and the heat loss of each room. And then oftentimes we find that a lot of the radiators that are in there, if they're relatively modern with the fins and decent surface area, they don't need replacing. But in some houses, they do. And I think it varies, and the price just varies accordingly. And often we find at survey that the house has got more to be done, but we've done this fixed price quote, so we have to stick to it. But sometimes you win a little bit and you find you don't need to do quite so much, and it's that piece in there. I think my summary of all of this piece would be, you have to change the radiators because you've got to make sure the house is warm enough. I think the trick to it is flow temperature. I think the new Cozy 6 heat pump, for example, is a high temp heat pump. It can run up to 80 degrees, and that can do true retrofit then, which is you don't need to change anything. You can essentially run it at the higher temperature, albeit with a trade-off of less OPEX up front because you're changing less radiators, but you might have higher run costs because you're running at 80 degrees, but you're still not using dirty gas. You're using electricity instead. So I think there's the flow temperature piece. I think there is, every house is different. And I think the bit that we will always try and do is we'll try and minimize the disruption wherever we can. But I'll give you an example. One of the pieces is visualizing the pipe runs. Yeah, and I know it's not very exciting, but I'll give you an example from my house. So on the Friday before the Monday, so the Monday the install was happening, because I'm Mr. Heat Pumps, I'm thinking, right, I've managed the whole process. And so I sat down with my wife and I said, look, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to do it. And she stood outside and said, where's the heat pump going? And I went, there. And she said, where's the pipes running? And I went, the return and flow and return. I said, along the front of the house. She said, it's not running along the front of my house, facing the street. So I had to go and get a contractor to dig a trench. Luckily, I knew somebody who did it. Trench, and to bury the pipes. But this sort of stuff of involving the entire house and thinking through what the impact's going to be is important. It's not massive. You just need to think, where's the pipes going to go? Where's the cylinder going to go? And if you do the big decisions, where's the heat pump going? Where's the cylinder going? Realistically, how many heat radiators need to be changed so you know how much disruption there's going to be? But the good thing with ours is, we never leave the customer without hot water as part of an install, and we never leave the customer without heating for more than a day. We often minimize that. And there's other things you can do. We put in hot air blowers that we take, and you get that's part of the install, so you can plug those in to keep it. So I think every house is different, and I think as long as you are really transparent with the customer on the level of disruption that they're going to get, and usually it's minimal, then there's no surprises. The terrible situation is when you say, oh, it's going to be a breeze, and then you come in and you change the radiators. I didn't know you were going to change the radiators. So no surprises. So I think
you've got to making sure that is clear and the customer is aware of what you're going to be stepping into the home and what upgrades are going to be done. But I mean, for quite some time now, we've championed the approach of high temperature for a number of reasons. One of the main ones from our perspective is we've been installing and subsequently monitoring heat pump system performance for a long time. We've seen a lot of installs go in, and we've seen how they've performed it in reality in comparison to the design. And there's a huge discrepancy in the calculation method for sizing radiators, and what the book says you need to do to what then actually happens in operation. So, and in simple terms, if you design a system to run at 45 degrees, it ends up running at 35 degrees. Yep. Because we're oversizing, because the methodology that we're all given to use from the compliance and regulatory perspective is oversizing everything, which is fine. It's good when in practice when that goes in and the customer accepts it. But I've always had the mindset of how many customers don't go ahead because of this headache of upgrading all their radiators and what have you. So more recently, we've been saying to customers, the installations we do are high temperature. We've been designing them at 60, 65 degrees, compliant with the MCS standards, and saying to the customer, we're on a journey with this. We're not going to fit this and then forget about you. We're on a journey. So we are designing the systems at 65. We're doing the minimum amount of radiator upgrades to meet that requirement. and then we monitor it. And as the year goes on, and if we say, actually, if your next radiator in your improvement schedule is this one, if you want to make it, if you want to reduce your running costs further, that opportunity is there. But you don't have to do that. From a compliance perspective, from a design perspective, everything is transparent with the customer. We make sure they're aware of it. And that means in those situations, when we're having people coming to us saying, I've been told I've got to upgrade 100% of my radiators. And then when we're going in and we're looking at, say, 20%, the bottom line is it comes down to that design temperature, as you said. Yeah. And then it's a question of how much a person is willing to have their house tore to pieces to get this technology in, how much they're willing to spend to get it in, the government grant and incentives around that. So there is, I think there's definitely a world where you see homes that don't need to have all these radiators upgraded. We've actually just done a barn conversion up in Preston. We didn't touch any of the radiators in there. The system was running at 80 degrees on the gas boiler. Yeah. And we've the heat pumps now in running at system was designed at 60 for the air temperatures that we're getting now. Sorry, 55 the air temperatures that we're getting now, and we've been monitoring the performance. We're getting an efficiency of 370%. Some of those radiators are on microbore as well. Yeah, and we're hitting the target temperatures in all the rooms, and the heat pump hasn't gone above 45.
Yeah, I think a key bit is transparency with the customer. Tell them up front what they're getting, and rest assured that there is a detailed heat loss done by room, and you have to hit the temperatures. You can't do a design that won't hit it. So you've got that as your fallback. Most people won't care. They'll think that an organisation, bigger organisations and that are going to do it properly, which we do, but you have got that fail-safe. Some of the other ones we keep getting hit is planning. So planning was a bane of my life. I think of all the customers that best answer for planning permission, by the way, is to avoid it. So site the heat pump so it isn't directly in line with next door's windows. So when you do the sound test, there isn't a direct site.
This is this permitted development.
Permitted development.
Fit it without having to notify.
Correct. So in 70% of our customers don't need planning permission. Okay, so 70% within permitted development, which means as long as it's more than 1 metre from the boundary and it's less than 42 decibels in noise of more than 1 metre away. Put that into context, because this is another big myth that they're noisy. That's about it's slightly less than a dishwasher. Yeah, but a dishwasher's inside your house, whereas a heat pump will be outside your house. So your chances of hearing it are nil. Me being me, when I got the job with Octopus, I found out my next door neighbour's got a heat pump. Never knew. You wouldn't hear it. Went round and had a look at it. And you just can't hear it. But maybe on the still dead of the night, when it's working in the middle of winter at its absolute top whack, you might be able to hear a faint hum, but it's really, really quiet.
They are super quiet now.
But planning permission, 1 metre from the boundary, you can usually avoid that by siting it and maybe doing a slightly longer pipe run. But noise is the bulk of our planning pieces. So we've set up a planning service. So really interesting.
In-house?
In-house planning service. So if you come to Octopus, we will do the planning for you. We can't do it for everybody because of the bandwidth, but for most of the customers, we do the planning for them. They pay for it. It's 270 quid into the planning portal, and then we do it. We found the weakest link in the chain is you've got to have somebody who can do the CAD/CAM designs for elevations of the houses, because that's what they demand from the council. Some of the councils will go for a simpler, more noddy diagram that's like graph paper and stuff, but most of them need the top designs. So we've now got a team who can do that, and we're doing the actual planning permission. Jesus. And we're learning an awful lot. And a lot of it's educating the councils in green energy design, because they've all got slightly different views. Because you still have to go to a local council, and it's down to the local planning officer's view, and sometimes you get slightly differing views. So I think there's a whole piece in there that we can do as an industry to work with the planners to get that education piece going. And there's recently been a consultation with government where they've asked our opinion on all this stuff. So hopefully some of the rules get changed.
It's I just think I was just thinking whether when Greg Jackson thought about setting up an energy supply company, did he have in his mind, obviously I need to cover all the planning. I need like 40 people in a planning department. Just
but the key thing is it's only a small team, fortunately. But we are constantly, the way I talk to the team is, if you imagine there's like to get your heat pump, there's like 110 high hurdles race, and there's maybe 9 hurdles. We're trying to either knock the hurdle down and remove it, or a step ladder over it. Planning permission's a step ladder over it. There's a lot of other ones, like applying for the BUS for the grant. We do that for you. There's lots of other stuff that we now do. And I've got a team that's nearly as big as the sales team that's part of my team, that as soon as they've said, yes, I'll sign a contract because I want to move forward with you, they manage the whole process through to install. So if you need a trench dug, you need planning done, you need to get your loft hatch extended, we've got a whole database of preferred contractors that we can book them in and do it all for you. Jeez. So we're taking that out of the way, and then you ring up the customer every week to check that they're happy and they're ready for the install date and they're all ready to go. Because they might have to do something like build a base. So, for the heat pump to go on, or clear some space is a classic one in the garage for maybe the cylinder. So we have a team who manage that through. And the bit that makes me smile is even when the front end demand piece is very strong, I'm still managing the actual install piece, which is the people moving through. So I manage the end to end, and it makes all the feedback you get at this piece feed straight into the front.
That's quite unique, though, actually, because usually it's kind of sales. Once that deposit's taken, I don't want to touch it.
We don't. That's the beauty of Octopus. We've designed it so there's no over the wall management, that you manage the end to end, and that's where you get a lot of the objections coming in, such as, oh, my loft hatch is too small. So you have to extend the loft hatch to get the cylinder up in the loft, if that's the only place for it to go. And suddenly you're on a little sort of mini project management curve with a customer, and we've just built teams who specialise in all those different pieces and manage it through.
Perfect. But it's led from sales. I like that.
But it is led from sales.
It's got to be. You've got to bring them in.
The other one that we get more, and I think it's because they ask the simple question, which is, do heat pumps really work? As in, there's a lot of, and I think, the dirty gas boiler industry is a massive lobby, and they are pumping out articles to try and...
Oh, they're looking for the negative stories.
Yeah, they're looking for the negative stories. I tell you another interesting thing that happened is, even negative press means that we get a peak. So off the back of the Cozy 6 launch and the BUS grant increasing, our orders and our applications for people interest went up 5-fold. And I mentioned there's 25,000 in September, and it's holding now at 2 times what it was previously. But equally, do you remember the BBC TV show, which the fact that that's now mainstream, that people are finding that home heating is getting a TV programme.
This is the Panorama show that was
on. Just moving on. And they said that house was paying £18,000. We had a you'd think, oh, it's negative because heat pumps must be expensive. It doubled. The number of applications came in. So even when you get negative press around heat pumps, it creates demand and interest from people who want to find out more.
There is. I mean, there was another article in the BBC this week, another negative statement about how a heat pump. There was somebody had an oil-fired system in a cottage in the middle of nowhere, and how it wasn't suitable for them. And it was to be fair, when I had a look at it, I thought you could definitely put a heat pump in that property. I think the electrification of heat project showing you can pretty much put a heat pump in any property. It all comes down to the cost. But so we've got some myths there that were busting. We've got
it's too cold. The run costs are too high. The thing doesn't work. And then on the way here, just for sport, I had a look to see when the first heat pump was actually invented. And there's 2 things I found out about that because I'm quite into my history. One was it was actually 1858, a guy called Peter von Rittingen in Austria, and they built a heat pump to dry salt on salt plains in Austria. And so he actually built it. So it's been going since 1858. And the second thing is that I've also found interesting, he's one of my sort of historical heroes, Lord Kelvin of Kelvin Grove Gallery in Glasgow and Kelvin Grove Park. He came up with all the laws of thermodynamics, the first and second laws of thermodynamics that underpins the whole industry. And the reason why I found that interesting is he went to uni at the age of 10. He went to Glasgow University at the age of 10, and he went to Cambridge at the age of 17. But the point being is this technology has been around forever. Refrigeration was 1748. So, and this stuff has been around forever, but it's been in Europe forever, and it's in all the countries that don't rely so heavily on gas. If you look at the league table, it's literally a league table of who doesn't rely heavily on gas. Scandinavian countries, don't rely heavily on gas, and so they've made the transition. Because we've been hooked on gas since North Sea came in the sort of late 60s, early 70s, it's hard to wean people off it, and there's a lot of people whose interest doesn't lie in getting you off it.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I still think educating. I'll give you another thought. You can go into the Octopus website and there's a thing called the Heat Pump Hub. Right? Equally, you go into Heatio and there's some fantastic resources. But more and more, there's little agencies. There's a company called the Heating Hub. Joe and Caroline have set up a business there that's like independently, they'll come and assess what's the right heating solution for your house.
Yeah.
Because people feel they need an independent organisation to come and do that for you so that they can justify their decision, because there's still conflicting information out there, even though this technology's been around for 150 years, yeah, and it's been proven across all these other countries, and we're proving it every day with the installations that we're doing. But there's a place for all of these things. Heat Geek, there's another one. They've got some fabulous resources out there. And I think the industry's got to kind of come together to have common information that you can get to that supports a decision, and build the market, because I think everyone will then benefit. Because deep down, you know, we just want as many heat pumps as possible in as many houses in Britain. And regardless who puts them in, it's going to, you know, a rising tide floats all boats. And as a result of which, everyone will prosper. But the big goal is it helps you decarbonise that 31% of CO2.
It's logic, isn't it? I mean, I think it was back end of last year, I went to Norway, and they're up there, as you say, Sweden's, Norway, Finland, I think.
They've got a cost of, sorry to interrupt, they've got a cost of pint crisis in Norway. I don't know if you went in a pub, but crikey.
But to be fair, that side is painful. But I was really impressed by the fact that I think it was something like 47% of homes that were off gas, were certainly on heat pumps.
Yeah.
And as you say, colder climates there, so that should be proof in the pudding that it works. But I think the bit that shocked me the most was how much bloody gas we're buying off them. Mm-hmm. You know, we're importing in. They don't need it anymore.
No, they don't.
Because they've switched over to heat
and they've got
pumps.
1 trillion sovereign wealth fund.
Yeah.
I'll just say that again, 1 trillion sovereign wealth fund, because they took all their money from, instead of spending it along the way like we did, they've invested it, and now they can accelerate the energy transition.
But that's it. So they accelerated their own energy transition, mm-hmm. and now along with I'm not necessarily saying this is Norway's fault, but the gas, the wholesale gas price went up with the invasion of Ukraine, mm-hmm. And then but all gas supply has gone up, hasn't it? It's not just the gas that we were buying from Russia, which was a relatively small amount. It's all the gas. The wholesale gas market went up. So the likes of Norway and that's their gas that they're providing to us mm-hmm. is very, very expensive.
It is, yeah, because it's the wholesale gas goes up across the board.
But the cost of getting gas out the ground is the same.
No, it hasn't. But then again, you know, there's various taxes they do. So Dong Energy, which is the Danish oil and natural gas, has rebranded about a decade ago to Ørsted, which is now a renewables business. You know, and this is quite controversial, but in my opinion, I've worked for Shell and BP in the past. Don't hold it against me, but you know, it was a long time ago. But you need those big companies spending the sort of money that's needed in wind turbines. And you can say, yeah, it's only a small part of their overall profits, and they really do need to stop taking stuff out of the ground, because that is killing the planet. But the money that they are investing is seeding the market to be able to bring the cost down of onshore and offshore wind, and that everybody then benefits. And but in Norway, Denmark, it was Denmark, Danish oil and natural gas and Ørsted, they just made a decision: we're going to move to become a green energy company. They divested their investments, sold a lot of their holdings, and now are pretty much in renewables. And that's what's going to happen. But they do it at the national level and just shift. And we are doing some stimulus, mm-hmm. which is great with the boiler upgrade scheme, but we don't move in the same way.
But does this play into this? We talk about the decision. We go right back to the start. This cost of living crisis. People are having to make decisions whether they're going to heat or eat. In a modern society, that shouldn't be the case, but mm-hmm. that's where we are.
Yeah.
And then there's a trigger moment. A boiler breaks in the home. You know, you've got to make that switch. And the decision you make now, at that moment, if your boiler breaks today, the decision you make, you're going to need to stick with it probably for the next 10 years. Mm-hmm. You're going to put it, if you decide to go with a boiler, you want a boiler for the next 10 years, because you're not really going to think about that again until your boiler breaks next, or until prices go through the roof, at which point you're now tied into something. So you're in a situation where you need to make that decision whether you go for a heat pump or a boiler, because your boiler's broke. we're now at a point where the capital cost of buying the thing and having it installed is probably better for a heat pump in comparison to a boiler with the £7,500 grant, which, and I've had this come up before, the grant is not means tested in that it's, if you have a home that meets the minimum levels of insulation and you own it, you're eligible. So it's not about people being on pension credits and child tax credits or benefits of any kind. It's open to anybody if you own your home and it qualifies. So you've got this opportunity to buy a green heating system to replace your boiler. With the right tariff from Octopus, the running costs are better.
Yeah, they are, yeah.
But then you're talking pound for pound, you're in there with gas prices. And then we've got to talk about what happens over those next 10 years then. So where is gas going to all of a sudden drop through the floor and it's going to be dirt cheap again? What's happening in that kind of gas and electricity market that's going to make electricity more appealing?
I think we touched on it earlier on. I think there's this idea that you've got, which is a journey and a progression towards green home energy. So you might start with a high temp heat pump and then slowly change your radiators and then add additional stuff in. That's one approach. The big bit for me is the levies. I think what's going to happen is over time, they're going to encourage electrification by taking some of the levies off electricity and getting it down to the price that it should be, which will mean that the economic case for run costs, and we've already got it for the upfront costs, is better for heat pumps. The run cost is so significantly different, you can't change it. I think one of the big challenges in there, which would be really interesting to see if any of your audience got any comments and thoughts on it, is what do you do for emergency replacement? Because the heat pump, we've been thinking about that. Could you have some pre-ordered heat pump, some of it modular, so it's already ready to go, sat in the warehouse, and actually you go out and do the survey on the first morning, but the kit gets delivered, and then you start doing the install straight away, so you can rapidly, because if it's bleak midwinter and the boiler breaks, currently slapping another boiler in is probably the simplest option than doing the heat pumps piece. So that's where the Formula One bit comes in. It's literally, can you get in quick and replace it? And I think that is a frontier where we're spending a lot of effort to try and think about how do we do those rapid installs when there is a broken boiler.
Yeah, we had one. We did it as a bit of a test case, and we called it kind of rent a heat pump. So you're right. You go in and install a heat pump into that situation. Contractually, with all the compliance and regulatory stuff, you've got that. You've got a challenge because you've got D&O applications. You've got a lot of work you need to go.
Yep.
If you put it in as a short-term temporary installation, you haven't necessarily got to go through all those same measures, and you get heating on, you get hot water on. So we had a heat pump that we call a hot water, a sun amp thermal battery, and we called it Saving the Planet Ryan. And this thing is just sits in the unit.
Yep.
Somebody's combi boiler breaks down, they want to go for a heat pump. In summer, as an example, we just lift this unit up, we go and plumb it in. Within a few hours, they've got hot water ready to go.
Yep.
It's heat pump compatible, so we can then do all the heat pump bits and then connect that up into it. And so in theory, within a couple of hours, you can get them back on, at least for hot water, maybe plug in some space heaters as a short-term solution if needed. But you're right, that distressed purchase market, I think it equates for something like 49% of the 1.7 million boilers fall within that market. So it's definitely one that needs to be addressed because we've got to be able to respond quickly.
And what a great place for I'm an entrepreneur at heart and I do a bit of angel investment. What a great place to start thinking about business ideas. Yeah. The team that comes in and thinks of a temporary solution for the heating and enables you to then be heat pump ready afterwards. What a great business model for somebody. Hi. And if you think about, some of the smaller installers, they've got all the skills in the kit bag to be able to nurse the existing system through and get you ready for a heat pump. There's there's a world of opportunity out there. Yeah. And I just feel as though by sharing some of the expertise and the knowledge, we'll get there a lot quicker.
Yeah, got to.
And Octopus is always up for, we host events and we share stuff online, and we're happy to chat to different people out there who are trying to innovate. I'm just trying to think of who else is out there. We work with yourselves, HTO. I've mentioned CB Heating. I've mentioned the Heating Hub guys. I mentioned Jamie Thompson up in Redcar. You suddenly start thinking about all these different angles onto the same lens. and there's a world of opportunity.
Yeah, it's huge.
If you look at the future market, and you were trying to pitch an idea in Dragon's Den, anything that's got green in it has got to be a winner.
Yeah. We've seen it with in our investment rounds. We did our pre-seed investment round we opened in November, and we actually closed it. We thought it'd take us about a year to raise the money we wanted to start building our virtual power plant and start kind of funding us through the first phases of these government accelerator programs. And as soon as we got into the kind of climate tech venture capitalist and angel investor networks, we closed our pre-seed round we opened in November, we closed it at the end of March, and we actually oversubscribed with angel investors by the end of March. And then with energy as a service coming to market in January, we opened for the seed round in August. And that's a much bigger raise. And if there are any investors out there interested, please visit the Heatio website and you'll be able to request a pitch deck. But there is social impact investors out there who are pushing this forward, as Octopus have seen and
that's the killer bit, Simon. There's lots of places you can invest your money. There's lots of businesses you can start up. But if you can do it where it genuinely means that your grandkids are going to have somewhere to live, and that you're not going to have pollution. I've just come back from a holiday in Egypt. Lucky enough to go there. It was absolutely fantastic. The pollution in Cairo, absolutely crazy with both the cars and for, some of it will probably come from heating systems. And it wasn't until quite recently, you used to drive up the M1 past Sheffield and there was smog. Where I come from, Teesside, big thing. But basically, we've got to do something about it. And to give you another idea, I went up to see a guy called Phil Forster, who's the chief exec up at Tees Valley Airport. He's going to make the first green airport. It's really hard to retrofit an airport once you've got them going. But he's building Tees Valley out, so making sure that all of the vehicles are electric, minimising the carbon footprint. And then it comes to light that Teesside, Teesport, is a free port, which means they've got air, which is the airport, they've got a seaport, and they've got land access. One of only 3 places in the world, Dubai and Singapore and Teesside. Those 3 trip off the tongue, right? But basically, they're scrapping out all of the, when I used to look out my window as a kid and see all the steelworks, all that's getting cleared away. And now they're building carbon capture, wow. They're running for the government carbon capture piece, hydrogen, but they're doing it for shipping. Because, hydrogen, we can talk about the merits of that for home heating, but let's not do that, we're short on time. But fantastic for big ships. They're going to need fuel, so it's a good solution, so they're going to do that. And also, they've got a big wind turbine manufacturer there, so they're going to build a whole green tech, but big industry, to rejuvenate Teesside. And for me, that gets me really excited, because I went through the whole cycle of British Steel closing, Smith's Docks closing, and nobody having any work when I grew up. To now, there could be this whole green revolution, and politicians are getting right behind it. Ben Houchin, who's the mayor up there, is orchestrating this level of investment.
But this stuff has to happen, doesn't it? We can't continue to be. Well, there is no longer cheap gas. We've been reliant on cheap gas. We've been in a situation where even, as you say, the price of electric is increased to incentivize gas to stay cheap. And unfortunately, the world markets as they are has sent gas up. That has generated this green economy in the UK, stimulated it at least. And unfortunately, we are behind most countries in Europe certainly on a lot of the heat pump side of things. But with people like Octopus driving this forward, the changes that the government waking up to the fact that we can't continue to be reliant on gas, because we're not in control of what goes on in the wider world. So the programs that are getting put in place, which will ultimately start to bring electricity prices down, or at least stabilize them, at least give us as the UK energy security for the long-term future. These will all come out of these kinds of programs that are being developed. And that, to me, when I talk to homeowners about the decision to switch, well, I've got my boiler and this heat pump costs around the same to buy. It costs around the same to run. And I'm going to be with this thing for 10 years. There's 2 parts. The one part that you mentioned there, if you've got to make that decision to put something in and it's as good in terms of running costs and capital costs as the fossil fuel version. When you put that in, you're leaving a legacy in that home. Because it might not be your children that are living in that home, but it'll be somebody's kids living in that home in 10, 15, 20 years' time. And they won't have to have this decision. You know, they won't have to worry where that energy is coming from, because by that point, we will be on green energy. We will have greener homes. We will have better energy security. So that decision you make now, you're making it for those for the future. But also when you put that in, even in the next 10 years, the landscape of the UK energy market is going to change dramatically. You see the speed at which we've changed since Octopus came in 2016. So we will have cheaper access to electricity. We'll have better access to electricity. We'll be able to optimize our homes better for usage. So even just on that strategic point, when you're making that decision in your own home, it feels like there's a massive opportunity there that should be presented to the consumer in comparison to a standard fossil fuel solution, gas boiler solution, that maybe is the most comfortable and everyone knows what it is. But it's got to warrant give heat pumps a little bit more thinking about when you are making that choice. And I would say the same for installers. You know, if installers are out there and they're offering that they've got a customer and they're stood in front of them, are you doing right by them by telling them to have another boiler? You know, if you're not offering that solution of an alternative, which is right for the long-term future of the home, of the individual, of your kids growing up, are you giving the right advice at that point? And bear in mind that, you know, yes, we install heat pumps. I'm encouraging other people to, you know, get into this market, put these heat pumps in people's homes, because to me, it's the right decision. Yeah,
and you know, I think to end, if you think about, we want to be really optimistic, and sort of, because, you know, I'm a natural optimist. One of the things that made me laugh is that how do you know you've made it? I think is when a unit of measurement gets named after you. So if you're Mr. Celsius or Mr. Kelvin for absolute zero for Lord Kelvin, I'd like to think that, you know, when a glass is half full, the measure between the top of the liquid and the top of the glass, I think that's a Bennett. That's what I like to be. That optimistic, it's half full. That's a Bennett.
That's what you're going
so to finish on sort of
a Bennett,
to finish on a Bennett, a sort of an optimistic note. I've deliberately chosen to work in an industry that's got that higher purpose. Whether it's you're economically minded and it's energy security that gives you the peace of mind, knowing that the UK is master of its own destiny and less reliant on outside sources, or it's about the climate challenge and you're doing your bit for, you know, future for the planet. But the thing that really excites me is, you know, I've got sales team managers who are 21. What a fantastic industry to be in. I keep saying to them, there's this perfect demand curve coming at you and you're satisfied and you've got a brilliant product. It'll never be this exciting again. You know, in my career, it was when Carlin Black Label was sponsoring the Premiership and everybody wanted Carlin Black Label. This is, you know, people are wanting heat pumps and they're in at the beginning. And for people who are coming out of uni or have got, you know, very engineering minded and they're doing some apprenticeships, to be able to get into an industry now and be able to be part of it from the outset and to shape it is just amazing, which is why, you know, we're hiring currently, I think, 50 installers a month, because we are training 50 installers a month. We're also hiring surveyors. It's a great opportunity for people who are in the gas, in the energy space, but currently maybe working on gas, to switch across, get into some of that higher purpose. But more importantly, the excitement of being part of the future as opposed to potentially being a legacy technology of the past.
Absolutely.
Albeit that legacy technology will be around for a while longer yet, probably another decade. But what an exciting time to get into it.
And I have to say, I mean, I visited the offices in Manchester and you kindly showed me around. And I mean, I'm passionate about what we do at Hetio, but I have to admit there was a moment I turned to Tom and I was like, yeah, I want to work here now.
and a lot of people do that, but you still need the individual entrepreneurs driving some of the innovative things. And I do think energy as a service is a winner. We've seen it with Zero Bills Homes. Yeah, crediting, you know, Zero Bills Homes. But you need the mixed estate of all that talent being harnessed together and sharing it for the common purpose of making the planet work.
And this 4,000?
I think we're nearly 4,000 people now. We operate in, you know, 10 or 11 countries around the world. And we all have a lot of fun while we do it. And I always say to my guys, I say, if you're not having fun while you do it, what's the point? And we do have a lot of fun.
I think that you do see in some of these, the organizations that maybe on the outside it looks, they look like this fun organization and the inside is. But I remember walking around your office and it was high fives going on, but everyone was, they were all working to a purpose. Yeah. But the atmosphere in there was incredible. The office itself was fantastic. But it wasn't, we're not talking, it wasn't low chrome and super flashy. It was a chilled out atmosphere. But every single person in there you came across, they had a buzz about them. They were working for something. It was fantastic.
What Greg's done is he set a very clear vision that everybody can see their contribution towards. Even though you might be a few layers away from top of the shop, you can absolutely see how you contribute. Because there's only three things we do. We generate electricity, we sell the energy, renewable energy, and we do home electrification. So you're working in 1/3 of the strategy. Whichever, whatever you're doing, you're one of the third.
And it's very obvious what we're working towards.
And he's a great advocate for the overall message. And I do fundamentally believe it's because our primary driver is not about making cold, hard cash. It's about making a difference in quite a long term, and not, to have the vision to say, I'm going to do that over a 10 to 15 years term. And then to find like-minded souls who are up for that sort of investment over that term is something quite special, which is why the business is growing. Yeah. And then the final piece of the jigsaw is, and there's a lot of people out there who've got institutional investment that they want to put somewhere that's truly ethical. And there isn't a better ethical investment than Octopus, because we wear our green heart on our sleeve.
Then Heatio.
And then Heatio, depending on the scale. So no, it's been really good. So thanks ever so much for having us.
No, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. And join us next time for the Heatio Home Energy Show. We've got a huge host of guests lined up over the next few weeks. We've actually got Clayton Brown coming on as well.
From CB Heating.
From CB Heating. So
I've done his trailer.
Thank you very much, everybody, for watching. See you soon.